I gave up everything I had built to be home for my daughters. I gave up the career, the salary, the professional identity, the respect that comes from being someone who does something the world can measure and value. I gave it up willingly, without resentment, because I believed that what I was building at home mattered more than anything I could build in an office. I believed in my wife. I believed in our family. I believed that the life we were constructing together was solid and real and worth every sacrifice. I was wrong about one of those things. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I am 40 years old. I have two daughters who are the center of my entire world. And on an ordinary afternoon at an ordinary school sports event, I accidentally picked up my wife's phone to record our daughter playing and discovered that the woman I had loved for 19 years had been having an affair with a younger man from her office for months, and that the two of them had been laughing about me the entire time. Josephine and I met when we were both 21 at a house party during our junior year of college, where she was laughing at something her friend had said, and I could not stop watching her. There was something about the way she laughed, completely unself-conscious, like she had no interest in managing how she appeared to anyone around her, that made me want to know everything about her immediately. We fell hard for each other the way young people fall, with total commitment and no awareness of the risks involved. We spent every possible moment together for the rest of that year and the year after it. And when we graduated, we got married in a small ceremony with our closest people around us, in a room full of the kind of happiness that makes you believe everything is going to work out exactly the way you imagine it. Those early years were genuinely good. The kind of good that other couples commented on, that made people say things like, "You two are the real thing." We both found decent work. I landed a position at a tech firm in the city handling IT infrastructure and product management. The kind of work that challenges you in ways you can feel but can't always explain. The kind of problem solving that gets under your skin in the best possible way. Josephine worked at her father's manufacturing company, a mid-sized industrial operation that produced cable mounting equipment for commercial and industrial clients. Her father, Robert, ran it the way he ran everything, with a steady hand, enormous personal loyalty, and complete commitment to the people who worked for him. We were building exactly what we had talked about: the house, the life, the future we had sketched out in a particular way young couples do, half plan and half dream, equally confident in both. Then I got promoted. My department had left unexpectedly following a disagreement with senior leadership, and because I was the only person in the organization who fully understood how everything connected, the vendor relationships, the system architecture, the operational frameworks that held the whole thing together. They gave me the role on the spot. The raise was significant. The bonuses were generous. Suddenly, I was earning roughly 3 times what Josephine made, which I never made a point of mentioning, because money had never been the measuring stick for how I thought about our life together. We were 28 when our first daughter arrived. Diana came into the world with her eyes open and her opinions already formed, or that's how it felt. She had my stubbornness and Josephine's intelligence and a laugh that filled whatever room she was in. 2 years later, Jasmine arrived, smaller and softer and more watchful than her sister. The kind of child who notices everything and says less than she is thinking. Our family felt complete in the way that complete feels when you don't know yet what's coming. Because Josephine worked for family, she had a flexibility that most new mothers don't get. She could leave early for appointments, work from home when the girls were sick, take a long lunch when something needed her attention. Her father was the kind of man who understood that life happened outside of work too, and he built that understanding into how he ran things. 5 years ago, Robert died. Heart attack at 61. No warning. 1 minute he was at his desk, and the next minute the paramedics were coming through the door, and none of it felt real for a long time afterward. It devastated Josephine in the quiet, particular way that losing a parent devastates you, not just the grief of it, but the reorganization of everything you thought you knew about how the world was structured. Her mother, Patricia, had never worked in the business, had spent their entire marriage keeping the home and raising Josephine with the kind of devoted attention that makes you realize what full-time parenting actually requires. She had no idea how to run a company. She barely understood what the company did. So Josephine stepped up. I want to be clear about what I mean when I say that, because it is important to understand what she actually did. She stepped into the role of CEO of a company she had been a mid-level employee at, in a male-dominated industry where clients doubted from the first meeting whether a woman could grasp the technical side of industrial manufacturing. And she not only kept the company alive, but made it grow. Within 18 months, she had doubled revenue, expanded into markets her father had never pursued, and renegotiated contracts that had been stagnant for years. Her salary passed mine by a meaningful margin. I was genuinely, completely proud of her. I mean that without qualification. What she did in those 18 months was remarkable, and I told her so regularly, and I meant it every time. But our daughters were feeling the impact of two parents who were both absent more than they were present. Diana started having conflicts at school, arguments with other kids that seemed to come from somewhere underneath the surface. Jasmine became anxious whenever we tried to leave her anywhere, clinging in a way that told me she was not getting what she needed. We had the conversation one night after the girls were asleep, sitting at the kitchen table with the house quiet around us, and Josephine made it clear that the company genuinely could not function without her. She had built every major client relationship personally. She understood the technical specifications better than anyone else in the organization. She had a vision for where the company was going that nobody else could execute. It made financial sense for me to be the one to step back. I agreed without much hesitation, and I want to be honest about that, because I think some people assume it must have been a sacrifice that cost me something I resented. It didn't. I had been burning out from the corporate environment for a while. The politics, the endless performance of competence for audiences who had already decided their opinions, the pressure to constantly justify my value to people who had no genuine interest in what I was actually doing. The idea of being home with my daughters, of being the one they ran to after school, of having dinner ready when Josephine walked to the door, genuinely appealed to me. So I became a stay-at-home dad, and I threw myself into it the way I had thrown myself into every job I had ever had. I handled everything. School drop-offs and pickups. Lunches packed with notes tucked inside, because Diana was the kind of kid who noticed things like that, and Jasmine was the kind of kid who needed them. Every meal cooked from scratch, because I had decided my family was going to eat properly, and I was going to be the person who made that happen. Cleaning, laundry, yard work, home repairs I learned from online videos at 11 o'clock at night after the girls were asleep. Grocery shopping with lists organized by store section. Every appointment scheduled. Every permission slip signed. Every school event attended. I became the room parent for both girls' classes. I knew their teachers, their friends' parents, their routines and their fears, and their particular ways of needing comfort when something went wrong. When Josephine came home at 7 or 8 in the evening, I made sure she could simply decompress. Dinner ready. Something she actually liked. House clean and organized. Girls bathed with homework finished. I would have a glass of wine waiting for her, and we would eat together, and she would spend time with Diana and Jasmine before bed, and then we would have our own time together. For a while, it worked the way I had hoped it would. Then, about a year ago, something changed in Josephine, and I could not identify what it was or where it had come from. She started making comments that felt designed to wound rather than communicate. "Do you even do anything all day?" So when she came home to find me folding laundry while the girls did their homework at the kitchen table. "Maybe you should get a real job instead of playing house." Delivered with a tone of dismissal that made my blood rise every single time, because I knew what I was doing, and I knew what it cost, and I knew that what I was providing had real value whether or not she was willing to see it. I had had a real job, a good one. I had been respected and valued in that job, and I had chosen to leave it for our family, for her, for Diana and Jasmine. The contempt in her voice when she talked about what I did all day felt like a specific kind of cruelty, aimed precisely at the place she knew would hurt most. The closeness between us disappeared too. Josephine had always been one who initiated, always the one who pulled me toward her with that particular look that meant she had decided she wanted me and was not especially interested in waiting. But suddenly she was never available. Tired, stressed, headache. Every time I tried, she had a reason that sounded reasonable in isolation and accumulated into something devastating over months. I told myself it was the pressure she was under. The pandemic had created supply chain chaos for manufacturing companies, and she was dealing with vendor failures and client demands and operational problems that had no clean solutions. I tried to be understanding. I gave her more space, took on more of the household load, tried to anticipate her needs before she expressed them. Nothing I did made any difference. If anything, she seemed to resent me more with each week that passed. The day everything changed was an ordinary Saturday. Diana had a game, and I was excited to watch her play. She had been working on her batting for weeks, staying after practice to work with a coach, and I wanted to record some of it for my parents out in Oregon who didn't get to see the girls nearly enough. I left my phone at home to rush to get everyone out the door on time, so I asked Josephine if I could use hers. She had been on it all morning, barely looking up even when Diane was talking to her, and I thought it would be good for her to put it down and actually watch our daughter play. She handed it over without much resistance and went to get snacks from the concession stand. I was recording Diane at bat, watching her settle into her stance with that concentrated expression she gets when she is determined to do something well, when a notification came through from a messaging application I did not recognize. The preview showed enough of a message that my stomach tightened before I had fully processed what I was reading. I told myself I was misunderstanding. I opened it. I was not misunderstanding. His name was Paul. He worked at Josephine's company. He was 8 years younger than me, and the messages between them went back months. Explicit in content, detailed in what they described, deeply personal in a way that told me this was not something casual or recent. They had been meeting. They had been planning when they could meet again. They talked about how close they were, how much they needed each other, how alive she felt when she was with him. And they talked about me. He called me a pathetic house husband, said I was weak and emasculated, made jokes about me doing laundry and cooking while he was doing my wife. And Josephine laughed with him, agreed with him, said I had become weak and useless, that I was not the man she had married anymore, that I had let myself go and become boring. She said things like he was more like a nanny than a husband, and she needed a real man, not someone who baked cookies for school fundraisers. I stood at the edge of that sports field with my wife's phone in my hands and my daughter at bat in front of me, and I felt my vision blur for a moment. My hands were shaking badly enough that I am certain whatever I filmed was unusable. I heard Josephine's footsteps on the gravel before she reached me. I closed the application. I kept filming. The drive home was quiet except for Diana and Jasmine in the back seat, talking about the game, completely unaware that their father's entire understanding of his life had just been destroyed. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I did not say a single word that was not a one-word answer to a direct question. That night in bed, for the first time in months, Josephine tried to initiate closeness. She rolled toward me and put her hand on my chest the way she used to, and I told her I was not in the mood, my voice flat and strange even to me. She snapped immediately, told me if I was going to be difficult, I could sleep on the couch. The anger in her voice was startling in its certainty, like I had committed some obvious offense by not wanting to be touched by a woman whose messages I had spent for hours reading. I got my pillow and moved to the guest room. I have slept there ever since. She has not asked why. She has not seemed to care. I lay awake that entire first night, running through every possible version of what came next. The version where I confronted her immediately, where I let my anger speak before my judgment could catch up. The version where I said nothing and tried to rebuild something from the wreckage without acknowledging what I had found. The version where I simply waited and watched and gathered everything I needed before I made a single move. I chose the third version. By morning, I had screenshotted every message, every photograph, every video, every cruel comment made at my expense. I saved everything to a cloud account she had no access to, organized by date, comprehensive and irrefutable. Then I called a law firm in the next town over. I wanted discretion. I did not want anyone in our social world to know what was happening before I was prepared for them to know. They had a cancellation, and I took it, dropped the girls at school, told them I loved them and have a good day, and drove there with my stomach in knots. The attorney I met with was Jessica David, sharp and experienced with kind eyes that had clearly sat across from people in situations like mine enough times to understand what the first meeting needed to be. I showed her everything on my tablet, and she reviewed it carefully, scrolling through it all without rushing, her expression moving from professional to genuinely sympathetic. When she finished, she looked up at me. "This is going to work heavily in your favor," she said. "Your wife has made some very poor decisions, and the evidence you've gathered is comprehensive. She explained what I could expect given my situation. I had left a well-compensated career in IT and product management to raise our children while Josephine ran the business. She had been barely present at home, having an affair, and prioritizing another man over her family. The divorce settlement would likely include child support, alimony, the house, and Josephine covering the mortgage as long as the girls lived there. There was also the matter of my years out of workforce. My professional skills had gaps now. My network had dissolved. I would need time and financial support to re-enter the job market at anywhere near the level I had left it. She advised me not to seek employment until after the divorce was finalized. Income now would change the calculations significantly. Then she asked if I wanted full custody. The question made everything real in a way that nothing else had yet. I told her I did not want to remove Josephine from the girls' lives entirely. She was still their mother, and they loved her, regardless of what she had done to me. But I wanted primary custody because I was the one who had been raising them. I knew their routines, their teachers, their fears, their particular ways of needing comfort. I knew Diana needed a note in her lunch when something hard was happening. I knew Jasmine needed to be told 3 times that everything was going to be okay before she believed it. Jessica told me that because Josephine had brought the affair partner into our home and around our daughters, I had a strong case for full custody with limited visitation. We agreed on primary custody with Josephine, getting 2 weekends per month, and the condition that no men could be present during her time with the girls. She also recommended paternity tests and an STD test. The paternity test came back confirming what I had never seriously doubted. Diana and Jasmine were mine. The STD results were clean, which made sense given that Josephine and I had not been intimate in over a year. Josephine was served with divorce papers at her workplace. By Jessica's account, it did not go well. She was also served with an order to vacate the house, and I was granted temporary full custody of the girls. Diana knew immediately that something was wrong. One of her friends had parents who had been through a divorce, and she understood what was happening. She cried and begged me to let her mother come home, and it broke something in me to hold her while she asked for the one thing I could not give her. Jasmine kept asking for her mommy. Simple and repeated and completely devastating. I felt like the worst father in the world some of those evenings, sitting with them while they cried, wondering if I should have just held the family together by absorbing betrayal silently and pretending none of it had happened. But I knew I could not do that. I could not teach my daughters that the way a marriage works is for one person to be humiliated and exploited and mocked while the other one does whatever they want. I could not model that for them and then send them out into the world to make their own choices about love. Josephine moved in with Patricia. Patricia reached out and asked to meet with me. She did not ask for the details of what happened, but she begged me not to keep the girls from her. I told her that as long as she could separate her daughter's choices from her relationship with Diana and Jasmine, she would always be welcome in their lives. She thanked me with tears running down her face. Thanksgiving was complicated. Patricia asked if we could all have dinner together for the girls' sake, and I consulted Jessica first, who said it was fine as long as I made absolutely clear through our communication channel that this was about the children and nothing else. The girls had been asking to see their mother, so I agreed. Josephine tried to hug me when we arrived. I stepped around her and greeted Patricia instead. Throughout dinner, she acted as though we were still a couple, raising Christmas plans and family vacations in a way that required me to give one-word answers and redirect myself toward helping Patricia with the cooking and cleanup. When Patricia said a prayer before the meal, Josephine sat next to me and tried to hold my hand. I moved mine. After dinner, the girls wanted to watch a movie together, which had been a family tradition, and I agreed reluctantly. Josephine tried to sit next to me on the couch, and I moved to a chair. Patricia spent most of the evening shooting her daughter looks that communicated what she thought of her behavior better than any words would have. When the movie ended and the girls had fallen asleep, I went back inside to collect their things, and Josephine cornered me in the hallway. She was crying, asking if we could work things out, her voice broken in a way that might have reached me if I had not spent 4 months sleeping in the guest room while she continued texting Paul. Before I could respond, Patricia appeared, pulled her daughter firmly away, and told me good night. The girls started therapy. The first session went reasonably well. The second was harder. The therapist had explained the separation to them in age-appropriate terms that included the word affair, and when I picked them up they were both sobbing, clinging to me in the car, telling me they love me in the desperate way children express love when they are frightened. I asked the therapist why she had introduced that information so soon, and she said that children know more than adults think they do. They had been sensing the tension between their parents for months, asking themselves questions that had no answers, constructing explanations in their own minds that were probably more frightening than the truth. She believed honesty was essential to their healing. That night, I ordered takeout and put on their favorite films, and we all stayed in my bedroom until they fell asleep. Then I went to the bathroom and came apart completely in the quiet of the room with the door closed, the kind of crying that has been building for so long it comes out of you all at once. I reached out to Paul's wife. I found her contact information in some of Josephine's work documents and called a number with no clear sense of what I was going to say. She answered, and when I explained who I was and why I was calling, she told me I was wrong and hung up. She called back 40 minutes later and asked where we could meet. We sat in a parking lot, and I showed her everything on my phone. She broke down immediately, asking how he could do this to her, asking how long it had been going on. When I told her approximately a year, maybe longer, her sadness shifted into something different. She removed her wig. She had been fighting cancer since before the affair began. 2 surgeries and chemotherapy over the past year and a half, all of it while her husband was meeting my wife in hotel rooms. She had just finished treatment. She was starting to feel like herself again. She had wanted to surprise her husband with closeness now that she was finally ready, and discovering this had taken that from her too. She cried about her child growing up in a broken home. She reached toward me at one point in a way that I understood, and I gently declined, telling her honestly that neither of us was in the right state of mind for that kind of decision. She thanked me for saying so. We exchanged numbers and stayed in contact. Christmas morning, I set up Santa's gifts for the girls. Diana was likely in her last year of believing, and I wanted to make it count. They woke up and tore into everything with the particular joy of children who have not yet lost their capacity for complete delight in small things. And we watched a film together, and they fell asleep on the couch, and the morning was warm and gentle and exactly what I had needed. In the evening, I dropped them at Patricia's for an overnight with Josephine. Their therapist had advised me to actively encourage their relationship with their mother for healthy development. And practically speaking, I needed Josephine to have no grounds for claiming I was alienating the girls. Paul's wife came over that evening. She had arranged for her in-laws to watch her toddler, and she arrived dressed nicely, wearing a pretty wig. And we had dinner and talked for a long time about who we were before any of this had happened, about what our lives had looked like before the people we trusted had made their choices. After dinner, we watched a film. I opened a bottle of wine. The conversation became more honest as the evening went on, more candid about what we had both lost and what we were both missing. I told her she could take off the wig if she was more comfortable without it, and complimented her on how she looked without it, and she removed it and teared up a little. What happened next was not planned or calculated. It was 2 people who had been lonely for a long time finding each other on an evening when neither of them had expected to find anyone. We were intimate, and afterward we both cried, and then we fell asleep, and in the morning we had breakfast and talked about what it had meant and agreed that while we did not regret it, we needed to be careful and honest about whether what we were feeling was genuine or simply particular vulnerability of people who had recently been through something devastating. She kissed me on the cheek before she left and said she would text later. The lawyers' meeting was surprisingly straightforward. Jessica laid out my terms clearly and comprehensively. Josephine's attorney kept pushing for reconciliation, kept framing the divorce as something that could be reconsidered for the girl's sake. Jessica dismissed this calmly each time and reminded him of the complete picture of what Josephine had done. He kept pushing. Jessica told him we would see them in court. 2 weeks later, Jessica called with news. Josephine had agreed to all the terms except one. She had initially wanted the girls every weekend. We negotiated it to 2 weekends per month with alternating holidays. I agreed because whatever she had done to me, she was still Diane and Jasmine's mother, and they needed that relationship if it could be made to work. Paul was arrested. He had shown up at Josephine's workplace, and a confrontation escalated into him physically attacking her, giving her a black eye and a split lip before her co-workers intervened and held him until police arrived. Josephine pressed charges. Then Paul was bailed out and vanished. Skipped town completely. Josephine backed down from pressing charges when he threatened to claim she had coerced him. He disappeared, and his parents claimed to know nothing about where he had gone. Patricia called to tell me about the assault and suggested I visit Josephine. I did not visit. Neither did the girls. Patricia said it was karma. I reminded her that her daughter still needed to be functional for Diana and Jasmine's sake, and asked her to help Josephine get back on her feet for the girls' benefit. She agreed. Diana's depression deepened as the divorce date approached. I noticed her clothes were not fitting the way they should. Her appetite had dropped. She was sleeping more than usual, and the life had gone quiet in her eyes in a way that frightened me. Her doctor and I talked about nutrition and about the possibility of medication. I was resistant at first. I did not want to medicate my 11-year-old daughter, did not want her brain chemistry adjusted as a solution to grief that had a legitimate cause. But watching her fade made me understand that sometimes the chemistry gets disrupted badly enough that it needs support to find its way back. After conversations with her doctor, her therapist, and Josephine, we put Diana on the lowest possible dosage with a plan to reduce it gradually once things stabilized. Jasmine was adjusting better. She missed her mother and still said so directly, the way young children do without editing themselves. But she was eating and sleeping and playing, and her world had found a new shape that she was beginning to trust. One afternoon at the gym, I ran into a neighbor named Kendrick. I had seen him around the neighborhood over the years, and we had talked a handful of times without ever becoming more than casual acquaintances. He came over while I was finishing on the bench press and asked if I was doing all right, clearly reading something in my face that I was not managing to conceal. I gave him the abbreviated version. Going through a divorce. Tried to get my head back in order. He nodded. Said he had been through something similar a couple of years ago and had spent a long time figuring out how to rebuild a social life that was not built around whoever had left. He told me about a platform called datingbox.com that he said was different from the usual approach, not about photographs and first impressions, and curated profiles designed to perform attractiveness. They use a compatibility system that matched people based on mutual values and genuine connection. He said it filtered out the performance and connected you with people who were actually on your frequency. I was not ready for anything like that yet, but I filed away as something that might matter later, and I finished my workout feeling fractionally lighter than I had when I walked in, which was the closest thing to hope I had felt in several months. Josephine asked to meet one final time before the divorce was finalized. She suggested the park where we used to take the girls on Sunday mornings when they were small, when everything was still what I thought it was. I agreed. I recorded the conversation. Most of it was about Diana and Jasmine. She was clearer-eyed about her failures as a mother than I had expected. She said she had failed miserably and needed to figure out how to do it right. She acknowledged that the girls were better off in my primary care. There was a version of this conversation that I had needed for a long time and was finally getting too late to change anything. Then she asked if we could call off the divorce. I said no without hesitation. I reminded her of everything, every cutting remark. Every night she let Paul mock me in messages she laughed at. Every sacrifice I had made for our family, that she had returned with contempt. The way she had allowed another man to disrespect me in the most intimate terms she could find and had agreed with him. The trauma she had brought into our daughters' lives. I asked her directly whether she genuinely believed she deserved a second chance, and she said no. Then she told me something I had not expected. She said she had never wanted to run the company. She had wanted me to take it over. She had imagined a version of our life where I ran her father's business and she stayed home with the girls, where I was the one building something in the professional world, while she was the one who had dinner ready and knew the teachers' names and packed the lunches with notes inside. She had never told me this. She had wanted to figure out on my own, and when I didn't, when I left my own career to make room for hers instead, the resentment had built until Paul came along and told her what she had always wanted to hear, that if I were a real man, she wouldn't have to work like this. I sat with that for a moment. I asked her why she hadn't simply told me what she wanted. She said she was too proud to ask for it directly. I asked what any of that had to do with an affair, and she had no clean answer, because there wasn't one. I told her that I would have supported whatever she needed if she had been honest about needing it, that I had no interest in controlling what role she played in our life. That pride and silence and manipulation had destroyed something that communication could have preserved, and that was on her and nobody else. Then she told me she had been pregnant with Paul's child during the worst of it, that she had ended the pregnancy without telling anyone, that Patricia had noticed she seemed off, but had attributed it to other things. I did not know what to do with that information. I still don't entirely. I got up and left. The divorce was finalized in early July. Paul never resurfaced. Paul's wife and I kept talking every day through all of it, both of us moving slowly and carefully, both of us aware how easy it would be to let pain and loneliness make decisions that clarity should make instead. We started dating properly after some months had passed, building something that felt different from the beginning, because it was built on the understanding of what happens when trust is broken and what it actually takes to earn it. Josephine got help, slowly. With Patricia's involvement and the pressure of knowing her daughters needed her to be functional, she began to rebuild. The relationship with Diana and Jasmine was strained and remained strained for a long time, but it was there, and it was being worked on in therapy by all three of them. Diana stabilized on her medication, and we began the gradual reduction when her doctor felt the time was right. The quiet came back to her eyes slowly, the way light comes back in early spring before you fully trust it. Jasmine settled into the new shape of her life with the particular resilience of younger children, the way they adjusted things that older people would carry longer. I started taking online courses to update my IT and product management skills, and eventually found part-time work that kept me present for the girls while letting me rebuild the professional foundation that the years at home had eroded. It was slower and less linear than I had expected, and there were days when the gap between where I was and where I had been felt too large to cross. But I crossed it, piece by piece, the way you build anything that lasts. I have thought a lot about what I would do differently if I could go back. I would have asked more questions earlier. I would have paid closer attention to the things that were not being said, the conversations we were not having, the needs that were being unmet on both sides without either of us acknowledging them. I would have trusted my instincts when I felt something shift in Josephine rather than explaining the shift away with reasons that felt charitable but were ultimately just comfortable. But I do not believe communication alone would have saved us, because what Josephine chose to do was a choice, not an accident, not a mistake, not a moment of weakness, a sustained, months-long choice to betray our marriage while mocking the man she had made vows to and the father of her children. What I carry from it is not bitterness. Bitterness would cost too much, and I have a life to build. What I carry is the understanding that honesty is not a comfort. It is a foundation, that the life you build on it may be harder and less perfect than the one you imagine, but it is the only kind of life that holds. My daughters taught me that in the way children teach their parents things, by simply existing and needing me to be worth something to them, I am trying to be worth something to them every day. That is enough. That has always been enough. If this story stayed with you, leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you are watching from. And if you are in the middle of something like this right now, something you are carrying alone, something that does not have a clean shape yet, I want you to know that the other side of it exists. It is quieter there, and it is honest,